What's up, everybody? On today's show, our winners and losers of SEC Week 10 as Bama and Georgia pick up monster wins, while Arkansas, Auburn, and Kentucky all win on the road. Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. This episode is presented to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helping you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Go post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. I got plenty to get into, so let's dive into it. As we do this time of week, we always start with our winners of the weekend, and let's dive right into it. As well, we'll start with the biggest marquee matchup of the college football weekend. It was LSU against Alabama, always a massive draw, and this one lived up to the hype. Jayden Daniels versus Jalen Milroe, and both quarterbacks put on a show. But it was Jalen Milroe having the nearly flawless day, thrown for 219 yards. But it was his legs that made the difference. 20 carries for 155 rushing yards, and not one, not two, not three, but 4 rushing touchdowns on the night as Alabama outlasted LSU, I guess you could say, 42-28. But this was the performance Alabama fans were hoping to see from Milroe ever since he earned that starting job. Of course, he loses to Texas in week 2, got benched for the South Florida game. But ever since then, Milroe has seemingly gotten better and better every week, making the big plays when his team needs it most. And this one, by far, his best rushing game of his young career, his first 100-yard rushing game. Alabama on the night, they went 11 of 14 on third down plays, and they ran for 288 yards playing keep away from Jayden Daniels and company at times. I will throw in here as a compliment to Jayden Daniels. I think he belongs in our winners of the weekend as well. He made some outstanding plays in this one. He threw for 219 and 2 touchdowns with 11 carries for 162 on the ground and a rushing score. And Jayden Daniels just continues to be one of the most electrifying players in college football. He did get knocked out of the game in the fourth quarter when Dallas Turner nailed him as he delivered a pass. A lot of LSU folks have called for targeting, or were calling for targeting, and a lot of Bama fans thought it was appropriately not called. But it sounds like Daniels maybe in concussion protocol now. We'll have to monitor his availability for LSU's game against Florida this weekend. But nonetheless, Jayden Daniels has delivered week in and week out. His team's 3 losses, mostly because the LSU defense is so bad. All 3 of LSU's losses to top 10 teams this year, Florida State, Ole Miss, and now Alabama. Look, Jayden's probably not going to win the Heisman, but at minimum, I think he should get an invite to New York. We'll see what happens over these next couple weeks. And who knows, if Jalen Milroe keeps playing like this, he'll find himself up there in New York. But credit Alabama, another winner of the weekend. I'll put Alabama's halftime adjustments in here. This one was tied 21-21 at the half, but it was Alabama's defense that stepped up in the second half, much like they did in the win over Tennessee a few weeks ago, and gets Ole Miss. Like, they just turned it all. They whatever Saban says to the team at halftime, they just come out and play much more enthused, much more energetic. They held LSU to just 7 second half points, and we've seen them do this, just like we said, multiple times this season. Justin Aboigbe had a sack. Terrion Arnold came up with the big interception of Jayden Daniels on a tip ball by Dallas Turner. And they did give up 478 yards of offense to LSU on the day, but they slowed them down in the second half. They give up that touchdown on the first drive of the second half. And here's what Bama's defense did against LSU down the stretch: punt, interception, punt, and turnover on downs. Meanwhile, Alabama's offense in the second half, they went touchdown, 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 missed field goal, end of game. So Bama moves one step closer to winning the SEC West, and the Tide need Ole Miss to lose again, or Bama needs to either simply beat Kentucky or Auburn, and they will be golden. Our next winner of the weekend, how about the Georgia defense? Not one, but two big fourth quarter interceptions in their 30-21 win over Mizzou. Credit Missouri, man. They fought their butts off battling with the Bulldogs in Athens, but in the fourth quarter, as Mizzou trailed by 6 points, it was 27-21. Brady Cook makes a big mistake, one of two costly interceptions, but one to big man Nazir Stackhouse with 7:46 to play. The other one in the final minutes to Javon Bullard. But how about the big man, Stackhouse, taking this interception in and running as fast as he could? It was not the prettiest day defensively for Georgia. They did give up 363 to Mizzou, 21 first downs. They did have 3 sacks, 1.5 from Jalen Walker, but the interceptions were huge, and they helped secure a big victory for Georgia to remain undefeated. Kirby Smart called the defensive tackle Nazir Stackhouse's improbable interception, quote, the biggest play of the game. Ladd McConkey called it the play of the year. And Georgia, they just continue to, on this stretch of consecutive games against ranked opponents, they will host Ole Miss coming up this Saturday. I do want to give a hat tip here to Mizzou's kicker, Harrison Mevis. He gave Mizzou a 13-10 lead with a 42-yard field goal. It gave him the school's career scoring record at Missouri. He passed Jeff Wolfert's 363 points he scored from 06 through 08. So congrats to Harrison Mevis. Another winner of the weekend. How about Quinshon Judkins? Ole Miss trailed Texas A&M 35-31 late in the fourth quarter. As Lane Kiffin's team marched right down the field, they went on a 9-play, 75-yard scoring drive to take a 38-35 lead. It would go on to win, but it was Quinshon Judkins coming up with some big runs on the drive, including a 9-yard run, another 9-yard run, a 15-yard run on a 3rd and 5, and then the go-ahead touchdown with 1 yard out with 1:40 to play. Judkins finished the day 23 carries, 102 yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns. And Quinshon Judkins now 4th in the SEC in total rushing yards at 793. And the Ole Miss Rebels, an impressive 8-1 overall, 5-1 in the conference. And they have a huge game this weekend playing Georgia over in Athens. The other winner of the weekend I got in this game, it was Trey Harris, the Ole Miss wide receiver, former Louisiana Tech receiver. He has just had a massive year at Ole Miss. Had his biggest game of the season for the Rebels. 11 catches, 213 yards, and a touchdown. Seemed to catch just about every ball Jackson Dart threw his way. It was his 4th 100-yard game of the season, but his first 200-yard game. And that puts Trey Harris now at 6th in the conference in total receiving yards. Crazy part is he missed a couple games for Ole Miss this season. Crazy to think where Trey Harris would be ranked if he had played in every game for the Rebels. All right, we will get to more winners of the weekend coming up in just a few minutes. I mean, we got plenty more to get into, but thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Like we said, coming up next, more winners of the weekend. But now it is time for our Game Changer of the Week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. Look, much like Jalen Milroe changed the game with his running ability for Alabama in the win over LSU, Athletic Brewing has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good. They are full-flavored, well-crafted, just like a full-strength beer. Their brews are great tasting, award-winning, and they beat out full-strength beers in global competitions. They brew over 50 styles of craft non-alcoholic beer, including IPAs, Goldens, Sours, and more. Best part is they are fit for all times, so you can drink them anytime, anywhere, and make any activity even more enjoyable. Whether you're watching a big game, tackling a workout, whatever it is, Athletic Brewing Company will come through for you. You can find them in stores, online, or at bars across the country. They're the fastest growing non-alcoholic brewery in the U.S. So come jump on board and check out what they have to offer. You can find them at athleticbrewing.com. And if you find something you like, first-time customers, use our promo code LOCKEDON. That gets you 15% off your first online order. That's LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. All right, run along here, Locked On SEC, and we're running through our winners of the weekend. And But we had a ton of great performances over the weekend. We already ran through several of them, so let's dive back into it as we get into maybe some of the games that you missed over the weekend. Getting a lot of you are maybe watching the headliner games, but let's jump into the Tennessee run game. They were a winner of the weekend. They were playing, I get it, they were playing 1-7 UConn, now 1-8 UConn, but the Tennessee run game, they executed like they have much of the season. 34 carries for 275 yards on the ground, 2 rushing touchdowns. And Jalen Wright, he led the way with 113 yards for the Vols. He is now 3rd in the SEC in rushing yards at 826. He only trails Cody Schrader and Ray Davis. And the Vols have the best rushing attack in the SEC, 3rd best rush attack in the country, behind just Air Force and Liberty. So Tennessee run game keeps doing what they are doing. A hat tip to Joe Milton as well. He was very efficient in this one. 254 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, or 2 passing touchdowns and a rushing score as the Vols won this one 59-3 to improve to 7-2 on the season, a perfect 5-0 at home. See what the Vols can do over these next couple of weeks. Another winner of the weekend. How about KJ Jefferson? Arkansas was winless in the SEC this year. They had fired their OC Dan Enos. They had a new play caller. And Arkansas quarterback KJ Jefferson led the Hogs into Gainesville, pulled off the overtime upset 39-36. KJ was 20 for 31 for 255, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, but he ran the ball 17 times for 92 yards and a score. He connected with Tyrone Broden for the game-winning go-ahead score, and Kenny Guyton appeared to do a much better job of calling plays to the assets of KJ. Connected with Andrew Armstrong, went over 100 yards. Armstrong, by the way, left the game. A little bit of a scary injury incident, but big win for the Hogs and KJ Jefferson. Their win snaps a 6-game losing streak and was Arkansas's first win in the Swamp ever. The win snapped Florida's 6-game home winning streak and may cost the Gators a trip to a bowl game. We'll get to that a little bit later, but brutal stretch for the rest of the way for Florida. Sam Pittman saying after the game, look, in the 2 weeks' time that we had with the bye week and getting ready for this week, he said a lot of things went on in the program, and they kept in it. You're either quitting or fighting in life. That's it. And I'm really proud because we fought. Now, KJ also got some help in having his running back, Rocket Sanders, come back, get back on the field. He ran 18 times for 103 yards, so that was helpful. And next up for Arkansas, they will host Auburn next Saturday. A couple things on the line here for KJ Jefferson. He is just 160 yards away from having the most passing yards in school history. He could pass Tyler Wilson for that record as soon as this game against Auburn. KJ is also currently tied with Brandon Allen for the most touchdown passes in Arkansas history with 64. So his next touchdown pass will give him 65, and he will own that outright program record. And he's already Arkansas's all-time leader in pass completions with 599. So KJ Jefferson just putting himself in the history books as one of the most accomplished Arkansas quarterbacks ever. Good stuff from him. Another winner of the weekend over in South Carolina, Stone Blanton. I kept telling you guys last week that this was a good Jacksonville State team going into Columbia to play a 2-6 South Carolina team. And they played their butts off, man. The battle of Gamecocks versus Gamecocks saw Jacksonville State tied with South Carolina going into the fourth quarter, 28-28. But after a field goal gave South Carolina their 31-28 lead, Jacksonville State started moving them down the field. They were looking for a touchdown and a win. But with 2 minutes to play, Jacksonville State down to the South Carolina 17-yard line. I mean, they are threatening. And on a 2nd and 12, South Carolina's Stone Blanton comes up with the huge play, an interception he would take to the house, 88 yards to the house for the pick six to give South Carolina a 38-28 lead, an eventual victory as they picked up their 3rd win of the year. Xavier Legette came up big in this one. He had 9 catches for 217 yards and 2 touchdowns. And a nice day from Spencer Rattler. He finished just 1 yard shy of 400. But a big shout out to the sophomore linebacker, Stone Blanton, who made the game-clinching play when Shane Beamer's team really needed it most. Another winner of the weekend. How about over at Auburn, Jarquez Hunter? I'm sure Not many of you watched Auburn versus Vanderbilt, but the Tigers got a much-needed 31-15 road win in Nashville, and a big reason why was the running back Jarquez Hunter. 19 carries for 183 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Auburn ran for 230 on the day. And Jarquez Hunter, now the 6th leading rusher in the SEC, with 636 on the season. He jumped ahead of the likes of Logan Diggs, Jace McClellan, Dacian Edwards. And now Jarquez Hunter, back-to-back 100-yard rushing games. And no coincidence, Auburn has now won 2 games in a row. They now sit at 5-4 with some winnable games up next at Arkansas, home against New Mexico State. And, of course, home for the Iron Bowl. There's a chance Auburn could be 7-4 going into the Iron Bowl. And that would be a nice turnaround for this crew. But shout out to Auburn's defense as well. They held Vandy to just 15 points, came up with 5 sacks. DJ James led the way with 7 tackles. But Jarquez Hunter, one of our winners of the weekend. And our last winner of the weekend, I'm throwing Kentucky's defense in there. After starting the season 5-0, Kentucky had dropped 3 games in a row, losses to Georgia, Mizzou, and Tennessee. And the big problem was their defense really just fell off. They gave up 51 to Georgia, 38 to Mizzou, 33 to Tennessee. But the Kentucky defense responded this week, taking advantage of playing a bad Mississippi State offense. It was on the road, cowbells and everything, and they held the Bulldogs to just 218 total yards of offense, 6 for 17 on third downs, 1 for 3 on fourth down, 5 sacks for the Wildcats. Trevin Wallace led the way with 9 tackles and a sack. De'Eric Jackson had a big pick 6. And the Kentucky offense didn't do much. Devin Leary threw 2 touchdowns, but really they didn't have to do much as Kentucky gets the rare win in Starkville, 24-3. And now they get the tough task of hosting Alabama in an early one this Saturday from Kroger Field. But shout out to Mark Stoops and the Kentucky defense getting it done and getting the win over Mississippi State. All right, coming up next, we are going to get into our losers of the weekend. Who depressed us? We'll get to that in just a sec, coming up here on Locked On SEC. And I want to remind you guys, this episode presented to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. Look, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs going to help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's almost the holiday season. I know a lot of you people are going to be or a lot of you who own your own business are going to be hiring seasonal help, or maybe you're just looking for some new workers for the start of the new year. That's where you have to go check out LinkedIn Jobs. They got simple tools like screening questions, going to make it easy for you to focus on the candidates with just the right skills you're looking for. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs, helping you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Go post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Go post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, continuing on here on Locked On SEC. We got to all of our winners of the week in SEC Week 10, but who depressed us? We don't like to say losers of the weekend, but let's be real. There are some losers of the weekend, some people who depressed us, who did not do very well, and they deserve some criticism. And we're going to start with, let's go ahead and start with Matt House at LSU. Look, I thought about putting a couple of maybe LSU's players on here specifically because they haven't played well and LSU's kind of underachieved. But the criticism falls at the hands of Matt House, their defensive coordinator. LSU's offense this year in 2023 is historically on par with the epic Joe Burrow offense of 2019. But while that team went undefeated and won the national championship, the 2023 LSU team is 6-3 because of one thing: Matt House's defense. If LSU even had a halfway decent defense this year, they might be undefeated because of how good Jayden Daniels and Mike Denbrock's offense has been. But the hesitation a lot of people had this past week in should I pick LSU to beat Alabama? It centered around, can LSU's defense get enough stops on Bama? And the answer, of course, was no. Alabama put up 500 yards of total offense. They won a ridiculous 11 for 14 on third downs. Alabama punted one time on the night. It was on their opening drive. After that, the Bama offense went touchdown, touchdown, missed field goal, touchdown. And then out of halftime went touchdown, 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 missed field goal, game over. But it wasn't just this game. I mean, it was the 494 yards to Florida State in week 1. It was 706 total yards to Ole Miss, which was epically, historically awful. 527 yards to Missouri. LSU ranks in the bottom third of college football in yards allowed this season, third worst in the SEC, only ahead of Vandy and South Carolina. And again, can we point out to some LSU players who've maybe not played great and, maybe not having the best secondary? Yeah, all that is applicable. But at the end of the day, it falls at Matt House's feet. Recruit better. Get better players on your defense. If it's one of those things where, well, they're just not executing my system, whatever it is. And the hard truth is this: Matt House will likely not be back at LSU next season. I think he's one of the highest paid defensive coordinators in all of college football. Remember, LSU had to pry him away from the NFL. And overall, I think he did a decent job last year, but we saw signs, right? Tennessee, Texas A&M, Georgia, all three of those games last year for LSU, the defense was just terrible. And look, last year, LSU, they had a special teams problem. We saw it every week. There was an issue on special teams. So what did Brian Kelly do in the offseason? He made a coaching change. This year, LSU has a defensive problem. Every week, the defense is giving up tons of points and tons of yards. So I expect Brian Kelly will make a change there. And it just seems so odd for an LSU defense to be this poor with names like Harold Perkins and Mason Smith. I mean, those guys are healthy and playing. So Matt House, you are a big fat L loser of the weekend. Again, credit Alabama. They did what they needed to do, but my God, get a stop. One punt. It was on the opening drive. Goodness. Another deep press of the weekend. I'm putting Brady Cook in here just for the simple fact, brutal interception to Nazir Stackhouse in the fourth quarter. Mizzou had really played well all day against Georgia, but that interception killed it. Georgia led 27-21. Here goes Mizzou. They're putting something together. And then the 6'3", 320-pound senior Stackhouse picks off a short pass from Brady Cook. Eli Drinkwood said after the game, look, Brady got us to the fourth quarter. He was tough and gritty like he always is. We got to see what happened on those turnovers. He said, I'm not disappointed at all in the play of Brady Cook. But, look, Cook played really well all day long prior to those late interceptions. He threw for 212 yards, including an early touchdown to Luther Burden. Cody Schrader ran for 112 yards and a score. Theo Weiss had 5 catches for 90 yards. But it was those 2 late turnovers that did them in. You can make a case. If this game was played in Como, maybe Mizzou pulls off the upset of Georgia. But Brady Cook, just untimely, disappointing interception. Again, they were down 9 when the second interception happened, so I get it. But that one to Stackhouse really just killed any chance of them. If they go down, they maybe take the lead there and pressure back on Georgia. But Brady Cook in our depressed of the weekend. Next up, how about Jimbo Fisher? The Aggies fell in Oxford on Saturday, 38-35. And while it was a very competitive game, a defense filled with 5-star athletes could not get a stop when it mattered most. And the Aggies took their 4th loss of the season, and now a schedule that still includes a road trip to LSU, a place where the Aggies have not won since they came into the conference. Jimbo could be staring down the barrel of a 7-5 season, and the rumblings get louder in College Station. Should they stick with Jimbo or pay his massive buyout and move on? Jimbo saying after the game, our guys fought, battled, and we got to help them make one more play. We got to find a couple of inches and cure this problem. And now the road losing streak for A&M extends to 9 games, and the Aggies are 0-4 against ranked teams. Not going well for Jimbo Fisher. Another deep press of the weekend, or loser of the weekend. How about Shamar Turner? Came up big on it. What was it? I think it was the blocked field goal he got and got a hand on, and that was big. A&M returns it for a touchdown. Big moment early, but in the third quarter, Shamar Turner is ejected for a flagrant personal foul. Turner had been blocked by Ole Miss's Micah Pettis on a play, and he took apparent issue with a small shove by Pettis as the play was ending. As Pettis stood up, Shamar Turner wound and delivered an uppercut to his groin area. Player is typically ejected after 2 unsportsmanlike conduct penalties, but Shamar Turner was ejected right away because it was considered a flagrant penalty. The penalty gave Ole Miss a first down at the A&M 6, and the Rebels scored on the very next play with a Quinshon Judkins run. Jimbo Fisher saying after the game, look, we can't lose our cool. Shamar is a great young player and a great young man, and he will learn from that. We'll make sure we get him right because he has a great future in the game, but it's a shame. Yeah, don't punch other football players in the groin. What are we doing here? All right, a few more for you here. Another depress of the weekend. I'm putting Billy Napier in here. After coming back to beat South Carolina a few weeks ago, the Florida Gators, remember they were sitting at 5-2, and we were talking about how impressive they had been. And then they proceed to lose to Georgia and then blow this game to Arkansas 39-36. And now the Gators are 5-4 with games at LSU, at Mizzou, and home against Florida State to finish off the season. And Billy Napier's crew is going to need to pull off an upset in one of these last few games to get a 6th win and become bowl eligible. Florida was wearing their all-black uniforms in this one, and I saw somebody say, yeah, it was a fitting look for a dark day in the Napier tenure. He's just in his second year there in Gainesville, but man, there's been so many ups and downs. The Gators were favored in this one. They rallied from a 14-0 hole and a 30-26 deficit late. They had a chance to win it at the end of regulation, but Trace Mack misses a 44-yard field goal. They botched an extra point in the third quarter. That there was another issue where they couldn't get their kicking team was running on the field while the offense was still scrambling to line up to spike the ball. I get it. They were playing without several defensive starters. They lose Shamar Turner for the year. Missing him out there stings. He was their leading tackler. But Billy Napier, ultimately, I think, the super conservative play calling at times and decision-making is what's angering a lot of Gator fans. Billy Napier was booed several times in this game, including once for burning 20 seconds off the clock before calling a timeout and settling for a short field goal in the second quarter. And then another one in the third for calling a third down run when Max Brown had to come in and replace Graham Mertz for a play. Look, they can do it, Napier and crew. They can win one of these last 3 games, but, I mean, they're going to have to if they want to get to a bowl game. All right, just a few more here for you. Deep press of the weekend. How about Mississippi State's offense? Just continues to get worse and worse without Will Rogers. This week in their loss to Kentucky, they played Mike Wright and Chris Parson at quarterback, but the Bulldogs could only muster 218 yards of offense. No Woody Marks in this one, but things just keep getting uglier and uglier each week. They were lucky to win that 7-3 game 2 weeks ago at Arkansas, but then after that, they lose at Auburn, scoring just 13 points, and then in this one, they scored just 3 points at home. And the Bulldogs went from being one of the top offenses in the country every year under Mike Leach to this year being dead last in the SEC, averaging just 22 points per game. Zach Arnett going to need to look long and hard at what this team's offense will look like moving into next season. Next up for State, it is a road trip out to Texas A&M. And lastly, to the weekend, I'm putting Clark Lee in here. I hate to say it, but the Clark Lee era at Vandy is quickly heading into reverse. Just a year after they came up with upset wins over Kentucky and Florida, ironically, against 2 quarterbacks who are now playing in the NFL, Will Levis and Anthony Richardson. But the Commodores started this season 2-0, and they have now lost 8 games in a row, winless in the conference. I thought this game might be their best chance at an upset, playing an Auburn team that's kind of in a rebuild. But Vandy loses 31-15. Lack of offense has been their problem. I know A.J. Swan has been out. Quarterback Ken Seals did what he could, but the past few weeks for Vandy, they scored 14 points, 20 points, 7 points, and then 15 this week. You cannot win in the SEC scoring that little. And in his 3 seasons at Vanderbilt now, Clark Lee is now 9-25 overall. 2-20 in conference play. Vandy will finish off the season on the road with games at South Carolina and at Tennessee to finish things off. And lastly, before we call it a show here, Kirby Smart setting the record straight with some reporters after the win over Missouri. He said that Georgia players believe in their system and having a competitive edge in the fourth quarter. He pointed to his O-lineman yelling at the defense to run off the field because the offense had its back. Kirby saying, quote, all games are going to be tight. Y'all are acting like we're having tight games. Tight games are what you do in the SEC. The margin of victory here, it's hard to win. Karras and Broderick, they just came up to me and said, Coach, it's hard to win. Make sure these guys enjoy it because they realize how hard it is across the NFL. It's hard. You're going to get every team's best shot. I thought our guys played a really good football game tonight. We practiced and prepared for it. I was proud of the way they played. The locker room is great. They've been in these kinds of battles. You got to love it. Kirby Smart saying, look, the margin of victory in the SEC, it is hard to win. Tight games are what we do in the SEC. There's a lot of tight ones this weekend. Probably going to be a lot more this weekend. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Thank you guys so much for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers coming back and checking us out every day. I'm Chris Gordy. Tomorrow we'll get to all the Monday takeaways, what all the coaches had to say at the podium. We'll get you an update on injury reports and all that right here on Locked On SEC. But for now, you guys have a great day, everybody, and thanks so much for listening and subscribing.